When the first rumors reached the Templin Institute from the deserts of Tatooine that Boba Fett was abandoning his career as a bounty hunter to become a crime lord, I was intrigued. Here, I thought, was an opportunity to analyze his decisions, speculate on their consequences, and gain some insight into the development of a criminal empire from the ground up. But now, with the rise of Boba Fett seemingly over, I can't help but feel this opportunity was wasted. But let's quickly review that rise to power. 5 years after the death of Jabba the Hutt, Boba Fett attacked his former palace and killed Bib Fortuna, who had taken over the criminal empire in Jabba's absence. In an attempt to consolidate his authority over Jabba's holdings and vassals, Fett demanded tribute and was granted this by some, but notably rejected by the mayor of neighboring Mos Espa. In addition to these meetings, Fett collected tributes in person, and after meeting the owner of a cantina named Sanctuary, was nearly assassinated. An interrogation revealed the assassin to have been hired by the mayor, who denied this and instead implicated the Hutts, whose emissaries, a brother and sister, had just arrived on Tatooine. They attempted to lay claim to Jabba's territories, were rebuffed by Fett, and later departed Tatooine upon learning that the mayor had begun working for the Pike Syndicate, another rival criminal organization. As Pike reinforcements flooded into Mos Espa, Fett attempted to create a defensive alliance with Mos Espa's existing crime families, but they only promised to remain neutral. To make up for this manpower shortage, Fett enlisted fellow Mandalorian Din Djarin, who in turn appealed to the citizens of Freetown, a settlement in the outlying Mos Pelgo territories. Eventually, the standoff between Boba Fett and the Pikes broke out into open warfare in the streets of Mos Espa. Fett's forces were ambushed, betrayed by the supposedly neutral crime families, but the Pikes were ultimately destroyed, caught between reinforcements from Freetown and Boba Fett's pet Rancor. So, Boba Fett ultimately achieved his initial goal, and now runs Jabba's former operations on Tatooine. But rather than having accomplished this through any planning or actions on his part, it instead seems like Boba just blundered into this outcome. If the Templin Institute were to summarize his career as a crime lord, we'd likely say that Boba Fett seemed directionless, lacked initiative, and just generally seemed naive. A lot of this might be due to a lack of clarity surrounding Boba Fett's overall objective. Sure, he says he wants to become a crime lord, but why exactly? And more importantly to this discussion, what does being a crime lord actually mean to Boba Fett? What does his ideal criminal empire look like? Jabba was involved in smuggling, extortion, murder, protection racketeering, money laundering, and quite a few other illicit activities. Is Boba Fett still interested in these enterprises? Does he intend to reform these businesses into something less harmful? Is this all purely for the money? Is it for prestige? Is he trying to improve the lives of the people of Tatooine? What does Boba Fett think he can accomplish as a crime lord? We can speculate, but as of now, a clear answer still seems elusive. If his overall objective is rather vague, then the methods he used to achieve it are even more imprecise. Boba mentions needing to move quickly to consolidate Jabba's holdings, but acts pretty casually at what is supposed to be a critical time. The only one of Jabba's businesses that Fett ever appears to visit is the Sanctuary Cantina, which, rather than a critical part of the overall empire, seems more like a money laundering operation, of which there are probably quite a few. I would have expected for Boba Fett to visit dozens or even hundreds of such businesses, making sure they know who's in charge. But instead, he spends most of his time hanging out in Jabba's old palace. This is strange because personal initiative is an area in which I thought Boba Fett would excel. As a bounty hunter, he was usually operating on his own, identifying opportunities for action, manipulating circumstances until they were in his favor, gathering local assets and resources. As a crime lord, I would have expected the same approach from Boba, gathering intelligence on the situation on Tatooine, identifying potential challengers to his regime, either eliminating them or buying their loyalty, seeking out allies, testing their loyalty, aggressively pushing the boundaries of his territory, winning over the locals and people of high status. Instead, Boba Fett in this role seems to be much more passive. He does some of these things, but only after they become a critical issue. His leadership is almost entirely reactive. There's a problem, he reacts. He never anticipates a problem or works to avoid one. He waits for Jabba's vassals to come to him, and seems almost entirely unprepared if they should refuse. Every development seems to take him by surprise. An especially prominent moment in Boba's career is when he invites the criminal families of Mos Espa to his palace to discuss an alliance against the Pikes. Boba makes his offer, but the families are unconvinced. So Boba immediately concedes and then just asks that they remain neutral. There's no attempt at negotiation, no threats, no proactive attempt on Boba's part to secure them as allies. He seemed so disinterested in actually convincing them to fight against the Pikes that I was convinced this had to be part of a bigger plan. Boba had lured the families to his palace only to then kill them or imprison them and put loyal people in charge of their respective organizations. Or maybe this was a ploy to track their movements. While they were at dinner, devices would be planted on all their ships, see where they were going, scout out their intentions. But I was wrong. Boba accepted their word, was eventually betrayed, and had no contingencies or counter moves for their actions. And this seems to be a common theme in his career as a crime lord. Boba takes everything at face value and never attempts to dig deeper into a person's motive or intentions. Garza Fwip, the owner of Sanctuary, seemed to accept Boba Fett as the new crime lord of Tatooine a bit too easily. Is she truly loyal to Boba? Or did she fill his helmet with coins, knowing he wouldn't be able to put it on when he's ambushed by assassins a few minutes later? The Hutts tried to kill Boba Fett, only to give up on Tatooine without a fight, and gift him a Rancor as restitution. Could this just be another Hutt plot to kill him? Can the Rancor trainer be trusted? Boba has known the Speeder Pike gang for just a few days. Can he count on them when things get tough? How are a bunch of bored kids gonna hold up when the blaster bolts start firing? Boba seems all too willing to hire people he doesn't really know on the spot. Except for Black Chrysanthemum. Why did Boba wait before offering a job? In all these situations, I tried to anticipate what Boba Fett must be thinking and planning, how he would play these situations for his benefit. But in every case, Boba just goes along with whatever's happening, often with very little consequence. Even major decisions affecting the state of Boba's empire are made almost flippantly. This not only makes him appear rather disinterested in the whole criminal empire thing, but he seems almost comically uninformed. For instance, most of Jabba's business is in the spice trade. But when asked to shut it down, Boba agrees with barely any hesitation. Almost as if this was the first time he was aware that's where the money was coming from. Was he unaware people on Tatooine weren't a fan of drug smuggling? Did he have any plans to replace it with another business? Why is a decision that's going to affect the entire economic output of his business treated like an afterthought? Just a few minutes later, this happens again. Boba wants to hold off the Pikes in his palace, away from Mos Espa where there is greater protection. One of the members of the Speederbike gang says that the people of Mos Espa need them, so Boba Fett should stay. Again, he agrees pretty much immediately. It seems like he agrees with whoever spoke last. If someone else had said, "We can best serve Mos Espa by preventing it from becoming a battlefield," would Boba Fett have again changed his mind? I kinda think so. I don't get the sense he has any strong opinions or feelings on basically anything he's doing. Ultimately though, this ends up being the wrong decision, and the Battle of Mos Espa is very nearly a disaster. Boba Fett's betrayed, his forces are cut off from one another, and the enemy brings in heavy equipment that Boba Fett's forces can't counter. If only Boba Fett had some sort of mobile, heavy weapon capable of destroying large groups of enemy personnel and weaponry. Something that would be especially effective on desert plains where there is almost no cover. Oh well, let's shoot small arms at these things in the middle of a neighborhood. I think it says a lot that Boba Fett eventually triumphs over the Pikes, not because of his own actions or ingenuity, but in spite of them. After spending an inordinate amount of time trying to win the respect of the citizens of Mos Espa, not a single one takes up arms in his defense. Freetown, a settlement with which Boba has had no contact, shows up instead. The Scorponect droids are destroyed not because Fett had planned for such an eventuality, but because the Hutts just happened to give him a Rancor. This is not to say that Boba Fett needed to be perfectly prepared for every situation. It just strikes me as almost unbelievable that an experienced bounty hunter would try to become a crime lord and then do very little aside from the odd meeting and a visit to a cantina to make it happen. But I think the biggest problem with the rise of Boba Fett is that I don't quite understand what it achieved. There were problems on Tatooine, but we never really saw them. We're told the streets are in chaos, but we never really see it. And we're told Boba Fett has taken control over Tatooine, but again, I don't know what this means. What is Boba Fett's criminal empire? And if you need a bit more proof, here is Mos Espa in the grips of the spice trade and the corrupt rule of the Hutts. Here it is in the middle of a deadly gang war. And here it is, under the benevolent rule of Boba Fett. In Incoming, the Templin Institute discusses the theories and ideas found across alternate worlds. If you've enjoyed this video and would like to join the Templin Institute, consider pledging to our Patreon page. Along with increased security access, you'll be able to vote in polls to determine future topics, get custom wallpaper every week, and receive some other exclusive rewards.